Story 1. Henry, the rain beat a steady rhythm on the asphalt. In the dark sky above, the rumble of distant thunder rolled slowly toward us. Daniel, the sound of my name pulled me from my reverie. I looked to the watch on her left wrist. It was a beautiful timepiece, a circular face surrounded by a gold bezel with a white-to-tone bracelet. Fine golden hands pointed to the time. Just a little before 4 p.m., it would be another half hour before I would be able to escape. "Daniel," she chided again. "Yes," I answered quickly, looking up at her. "Yes," I repeated, somewhat sheepishly. The corner of Miss Watson's mouth turned upward in a slight smile as she moved back toward her desk. My sole companion sitting at the desk next to mine waved a finger. Mimicking a scolding, I ignored her as my eyes drifted back outside. Dark, dreary, and wet. It was the perfect metaphor for Friday afternoon detente. I tried to force my attention back toward my math textbook, but I found myself unable to concentrate. Miss Watson, Emma, my detention buddy, wheedled, "Can I go yet?" Unwilling to try and force myself through my next math problem, I focused on Miss Watson instead. I had assumed she was somewhere around 40, judging by the laughter lines tugging at the corner of her eyes and the faint wrinkles on her brow. She was an attractive woman, tall and fit, with her dark brown hair cut short. Her jaw was pronounced, giving her the look of a fighter. While she had always been kind and patient with me, she could be fearful when angry. She tapped the face of her watch in response to Emma's question. "Mr. Does made it clear to me you were to remain in detention until 4. It's nearly 4 now, and when it's exactly 4, you may go." Miss Watson looked to me, and I flushed as my gaze lingered too long on her. I looked down at my textbook as she approached. "How are you finding these?" she asked quietly. "Fine," I lied. I was a smart kid, but always struggled with numbers. I had flunked the previous night's homework so badly that Miss Watson had placed me in detention so I could catch up. I watched as she traced a finger down my work so far. "Good," she said, but slow. "I'm expecting you to have this complete before." Emma's scream pierced the classroom. Both Miss Watson and I jumped as one. "Emma Delaney," Miss Watson shouted, quickly regaining her composure. "What do you think you're doing?" Emma raised a shaky hand but said nothing. I watched as my teacher's expression softened. "Emma, what is it?" I looked out to the darkening playground, expecting to see someone staring through the window, but there was no one there. "Emma." Miss Watson placed a hand on her pupil's shoulder. "I saw Henry," Emma squeaked. I felt myself swallow hard. "Oh, for the love of some of Miss Watson's fire returned." "Emma, I will not have you disrupt Daniel with some childish story." "I saw him," Emma repeated. Watery eyes looked up at Miss Watson. It crawled under the cabinet. Flashed across Miss Watson's features for a brief second. She looked at her watch and then back to Emma with a heavy sigh. "You may go," she said after a few seconds of deliberation. Emma didn't need a second invitation. She didn't bother packing her bag. She simply grabbed it, her books, and bolted for the door. I listened to the fading footsteps faded as Emma raced down the tiled corridor. Henry, Miss Watson, laughed softly as she sat on Emma's now empty desk. "Not a bad way to buy yourself a couple of minutes out of detention, I suppose. I've heard other people say they've seen him too," I offered. Everyone had heard the stories. Miss Wasson's smile was kind. I've been teaching here for close to 20 years now, Daniel. The Henry story has been going well before I started. Don T. Let Emma's acting spook you. I would never have thought Emma to be clever enough to think of pulling such a stunt, or talented enough to be so convincing. She seemed pretty sure, I offered quietly, trying to ignore the small flash of shame. At 15 I was too old to get spooked by ghost stories. You don't believe her, did you? Miss Wasson's tone suggested patience tinged with a hint of disappointment, as if she had expected more of me. Before I could deny anything, Miss Wasson had stood up and moved back toward the front of the class. I watched as she fetched a long ruler from the holder beside the whiteboard cabinet. Was it? I nodded weakly. Okay, I'll chase our friend Henry, and then you get back to your work, she said, pointing with the ruler and favoring me with a friendly wink. I nodded again as she knelt by the cabinet. Henry, Miss Wasson poked hard with the ruler. Henry, I felt myself grow uneasy. I wanted to say that my Haker had proven her point, that I was being silly and I should get back to work. Miss Wasson, I said meekly. She turned to look at me. Miss Wasson, double quotes. The words died in my mouth. Why? A whimper. A hand crept out from underneath the cabinet. A pale white hand, and nothing more. I was frozen in place as it scuttled forward toward Miss Wasson. Distracted by me, she did not see it as it crept toward her. The hand brushed her own. I could see the surprise register on her face before she looked slowly down. There was no screaming. Miss Wasson simply gasped as the ruler dropped from her hand. She followed it down, slumping to the ground at the foot of the cabinet. Miss Wasson, she didn't move. Her eyes were closed tight. Slowly, I raised myself from my seat, trying to ignore the bile that began to rise in my throat. Miss Wasson, I tried again, more feebly than before. Slowly, Henry crawled up Miss Wasson's left arm and onto her back. His pale form stood out starkly against the dark gray of her sweater. I watched as he started moving toward her neck. Some unknown instinct kicked at me then, an inexplicable belief which suggested he meant my teacher harm. I was too afraid to move toward them. My mind screamed that I should, but my legs would not respond. Instead, I lifted and heaved my textbook toward them. It sailed embarrassingly wide, landing with a heavy thud on the wall behind where Miss Wasson lay. Henry turned at the sound and scuttled back toward the cover of the cabinet. I ran to Miss Wasson's prone form. Miss Wasson. It was no good. She had fainted, dead away, her body limp. As I shook her from the shadows of the cabinet, I could feel Henry watching me as I picked my teacher up and dragged her to tea. Story 2. My high school had a second basement. I grew up in a small town in New Jersey and attended the local public high school. It was senior year, and my friend Jack was in charge of setting up chairs for an assembly later that day. I got roped into helping him, but it wasn't bad because I got to skip my 5th period math class. We eventually ran out of chairs, and one of the janitors gave us a big ring of keys and told us to get the rest out of the basement. Ever since I was a kid, I marveled at those rings with dozens of keys jangling together. They could take you anywhere. Jack made the mistake of letting me carry the keys down to the basement. While I was walking over to a stack of chairs, my foot hooked around the leg of a folding table, and I fell flat on my stomach onto the hard concrete, knocking the wind out of me. The keys skirted across the room and disappeared into behind the row of metal folding chairs. Shit, I groaned, bringing myself to my knees and hoping I would be able to breathe correctly again soon. "You better find the keys," Jack warned from behind an armful of folding chairs. "I'm going to take these upstairs. I'll be back in a minute." Turning on the flashlight on my phone, I crawled around on my hands and knees on the dirty floor. Nothing. With a heavy sigh, I began to move some of the sea hairs out of the way to search along the edge of the wall. The keys were nowhere to be found. Just when I was about to give up, I saw a hole in the floor about the size of two fists behind where a group of chairs had been. Not wanting to stick my hand into a filthy, strange hole in my school's basement, I set my phone on top of it and took a picture. The angle was awful, but in the corner of the frame I could make out part of the keyring, which had caught on something jutting out from one side of the hole. Begrudgingly, I stuck my hand inside and fumbled around for a little bit to untie. My fingers wrapped around the keys. As I was bringing my hand back up, I felt a stinging pain on the side of my thumb. I quickly pulled the keys up and wiped my hand off on my jeans. Coating the keys and my hand was a thick gray mucus. I gagged and made a mental note to have Jack return the keys. I discovered that the pain I felt was from a thin, inch-long scratch running up the length of my thumb. I went to delete the picture on my phone when I noticed a blurry object resting at the edge of the photo. It seemed to be a tiny, hand-like structure with a small palm branching off into three bony fingers capped with razor-sharp claws. I figured I would take one more picture to prove that my eyes were playing tricks on me, but when I saw the image, it took everything. I had to refrain from sprinting upstairs and going home for the day. My phone screen displayed an image of the hole leading into a small tunnel, which soon opened into a good-sized room below the basement. There were no doors or windows that I could see, and as far as I could guess, the only way in or out of that room was through the hole in the floor. Hundreds of what appeared to be needles poked out from the walls and ceiling. A few reached up into the hole, which is how I must have cut my hand. Just as I was trying to think of a place I could go to get about 6 tetanus shots, I noticed that the large mass on the floor covered with that gray slime was actually composed of hundreds, maybe thousands, of tiny creatures. They were the same color as the gray mucus and had 2 stubby arms and 3 spindly legs that looked more like tendrils. Each one had a wide mouth full of rows of teeth that bore an unsettling resemblance to the needles coming out of the walls. I showed Jack when he came back down, and we grabbed more chairs than was safe to carry up a flight of stairs and hauled us out of that basement. We showed our friends the picture, which was then circulated throughout Ost of the school, and rumors about the room beneath the basement ran wild in the halls. For weeks, I was plagued with recurring nightmares about the hole in the floor. It was always the same. I would find myself in that room of the basement, having lost the keys. It played out almost exactly the same as it did in real life, except when I reached into the hole for the keyring, my hand was yanked inside. I was laying on the concrete, shoulder deep into the room beneath the basement, screaming as millions of needle teeth gnashed the flesh on my arm. ripping muscle and skin roughly from the bone. The nightmare was horrifying, but on the nights when it seemed the most real, I often awoke to find small needle marks on my body. I had this dream for months, and it was really starting to get to me. I began to see more holes in various places in the school. The needles in these reach almost to the mouth of the opening, and I didn't need to look inside to know that I would find another sea of those writhing monsters within. Graduation couldn't come fast enough. While I was packing for college, I found one of those holes in the wall of my closet. I covered it with a whole roll of duct tape and nailed a piece of plywood over it for good measure. I went to college in St. Louis, and moving halfway across the country helped a lot to put my mind at ease. When I visited home during Christmas break my freshman year, the hole in my closet had been plastered shut and painted over, leading me to believe it was just a normal hole my frightened mind had seen. Convinced me was something more. I live in St. Louis now, and have been adjusting to life in the real world pretty well. I just got a job I really enjoy and seem to be succeeding at, and I'm planning on proposing to my girlfriend soon. I had chalked up the holes to stress and paranoia. I've had several new phones since then, and I haven't been able to find that picture again. Maybe my mind had exaggerated the whole thing. I was comfortable believing that the whole ordeal could be explained by nightmares and anxiety. But when I was walking downtown today, I passed through an alley on my way home from a restaurant. There was something peeking out from behind a dumpster. It was a hole leaking gray mucus, big enough for me to crawl into. The hole on the side of an abandoned building in the older part of the city went down into the ground. Long, shiny needles peeked out from inside and shone in the moonlight. I sprinted all the way home, leaning on the wall to catch my breath. I felt something sharp poke into my back. To my horror, I found a small hole beginning to form on the wall of my kitchen. Story 3. Darkness. Although much ridiculed as a childish fear, a wariness of the dark is an instinct which has, through millions of years of evolution, become ingrained on our subconscious. Even a fully grown manly man, 6 foot something with rippling biceps and sturdy facial hair, cannot deny in all honesty that he has never looked into a dark space and wondered, without meaning to, what might be looking back. Children are, he, without question, far more at one with their instincts than adult humans can possibly be. As we learn about the vast intricacies of modern culture by our parents, teachers, and experiences, we owes clear communication with our inner voice. It is this voice which warns you when an unseen danger is nearby, giving you temporarily heightened senses in order to safely escape the hazard. It is this voice, too, which asks you to question whether you are going about unseen when wandering in the dark. The truth, in its most basic and raw form, is that you are never unseen, unnoticed, or unwatched, just as people are prone to stopping and watching animals in a park or slowing down on the motorway to survey the carnage of a recent accident. So people are observed by those who wish not to be known. It is widely believed by those who are of an understanding that we are not alone in the shadows, that our instinctual voice chooses to become nothing more than a nagging, feeling in the backs of our minds by the time we reach adulthood. For, if it were not so, we would be consciously aware of our voices, and this would cause them enormous displeasure. Not only would we be aware of them, but we would be able to hear them. In order to explain this as well as I am capable, I will tell you the story of a young woman whom we will name Elle, in order to maintain her privacy and to distance ourselves from the situation as much as possible. I implore you, before reading on, to never attempt the same actions as Elle. Never do as she did, or you will become what she has become. You will lose yourself to the darkness. Elle was in her mid-30s, divorced and childless, living once more with her parents in their handsome four-bed somewhere in the suburbs of London. Elle worked as a freelance journalist and did most of her writing from the room her parents had kindly set up as a study for her. It was one of the back bedrooms, an odd shape with 5 walls rather than 4. Bookcases lined 2 of the walls. A large bay window dominated the back of the room, and a broad fireplace stood proudly in the center. Above it was an ornate Victorian mirror Elle's mother had bought at a church fete almost 2 decades before. The window never faced the sun, and the chintzy lampshade overhead did little to cast light into the room. It was uninspiring and dim. But Elle had not been asked to pay rent during the financial fallout of her divorce, and she refused to complain about their kindness. While writing, Elle would often hit a block, jump to her feet, and pace back and forth while her mind scrambled around, trying to find the right words. Once she had them, she would dive back down into the chair and type away furiously. This cycle would be repeated numerous times. During a few hours of writing, it came to the point that Elle would close her eyes while she did it, able to track her movements back and forth across the room by the squeezing floorboard on her 4th step and the cool hint of a draft as she crossed the path of the fireplace's mouth. It was late October, and she was writing a frustratingly fluffy piece about mental health in the winter months. Elle did something she hadn't done before during once of her pacing runs. She opened her eyes as she turned back toward her desk. It was a split second, almost too quick to see, and yet she knew she had seen it. In the mirror, behind her own haggard reflection, something had moved in the dim shadows between the bookcases. On instinct, she immediately looked to the shadowy space and found it, unsurprisingly to her adult mind, to be unoccupied. Just a trick of the light, she muttered to herself and settled back down to her work. Later, after giving up on an article that refused to be written, she shut down her laptop and, as she stepped out of the room, glanced back once more. Once again, it was only a split second, but she had seen it. The first time, she had shaken it off without trouble. The second time was not quite so easy. In bed that night, she read until her eyes were burning from the strain, and the words on the page were turning into a blurred mass of meaningless letters. Putting the book on the knitstand, she clicked off the lamp without thought and settled back against the pillows. Her mind, addled with tiredness and stress, found itself unable to suppress her inner voice. "Can you hear that?" It was white noise, nothing more. That almost high-pitched hum that, every now and then, would inexplicably inhabit your hearing for several seconds before disappearing once more. There was no rhyme or reason to it. It was just one of those things. And why? At half asleep, Elle did something she had never before done in her life. She listened to it. Whispers. Her eyes shot open in the darkness. She could hear whispers. She could not understand the words, but she knew, without a doubt, that she could hear voices whispering in the dark. They were so quiet, so shrill and so distant that she could not place them, but they were definitely audible to her. Elle was not a woman to retreat from the unknown, and so, unwisely, she concentrated harder. Her interest now piqued, her mind racing. Was this what crazy people experienced when they claimed to hear voices in their heads? Were they actually more perceptive than normal people? As Elle fought harder to understand the voices, they became more and more aware of her alertness to the It took only minutes, barely even 5 of them, before the young woman was lost to them forever. Because once you begin to listen, they listen back, and they gain access to your mind, all its hidden corners, all the deep, dark thoughts you keep for yourself and never let anyone know about. And once they know these things, they use them against you. You drive yourself mad from the very core of your mind. Her parents, doctors, and friends blamed her breakdown on the grief of her failed marriage. And though she was seen and treated by many professionals in the years that followed, no one could ever get through to her, all because she had stopped and listened. You're doing it now, aren't you? You're trying to hear, you're trying to see. From the corner of your eye, you have been since the moment you read what Elle did. You have been trying to tune into the voices, to hear what they have to say that is so awful that you would lose your sanity. You don't believe it is possible. You are listening now, listening to the darkness, and I am so sorry, my friend. I am truly, terribly sorry. Because we are listening back. Story 4, Help Need. D. As I am typing this, I am trying to be as calm as possible, as calm as possible. I am hoping to God it cannot read what I am writing. I have acquired a new friend. He's a very nice one. He stays with me all the time. He stays with me everywhere. He terrifies me. Nothing I do can get it off my back. It started around a month back. I and my sister had gone to Digga. It isn't far from where we are, but it takes quite some time. The area is divided into 2 places, Old Digga and New Digga. A month ago, I and my sister landed in New Digga with hopes to have a few days in the beach and enjoy the waters. It wasn't a particularly smart decision, seeing that the humidity made it really difficult to as much as breath in normal air. It was hotter than in here, but I think we enjoyed the nights. It was cool. That's the thing about being with my sister. When we came together, every dumb idea started seeming like the smartest idea in the world. We were there for a week. On the 4th day of our visit, we decided to very dumbly walk from Old Digga to New Digga. It is quite the distance, and the path we chose was quite secluded and hadn't been used for quite some time after a new and clean path had been constructed for easy travel by car. Due to this reason, an overgrowth of trees surrounded the path, and the path in itself was full of shrub, rye and creepers. We 2 sisters walked from there without any heed to the numerous dangers we could have in. There could have been burglars, psychopaths, animals, things, but we, being the foolish sisters that we were, we decided to walk the path and call it an experience. We decided that we were the strongest people on earth and we could tackle whatever came our way. Do you know what our only weapon was? It was a flashlight. So with an extensive Chuck Norris-like attitude, we had set off down the dark road guided by our flashlights, keeping a positive mentality. And sure enough, we didn't encounter any ungodly things till, at least midway, halfway through the road, we came across this awkward, smallish structure on the side of a road. My immediate thought was it could be an elaborate doghouse. It was made of a reddish stone and had carvings around a tall, at least according to the height of the structure, domed doorway. Its conical roof came till our thighs, and it seemed to be a pretty interesting structure. I and my sister made a stop there, a nice stoop, and looked inside it. Obviously, the inside was dark, and even though I shone the flashlight in it, I saw only darkness, maybe a few creepers to add to it. Deeming the structure nothing unusual, we set back in our path. I think it was then that it all started. As we walked, I heard footsteps behind us, very hushed footsteps, like someone was trying to sneak behind us. I had turned back, but obviously there was nothing, only a slight breeze. My sister heard it next, and she told me about it. We called out in the darkness behind us. Nothing. Obviously, we got slightly scared there because it was then that the possibility of rogue psychopaths finding refuge had occurred to us. I still can't fathom how it didn't occur to us right in the beginning. We kept hearing the footsteps, which by the end had turned into a hushed slithering throughout the rest of the path, and it only stopped when the woods ended and we were in New Digga. Do you know what we did all the while we kept hearing the muffled footsteps? We ignored it. The rest of our stay was uneventful, and after we came back, almost a week had passed. It started off somewhere in the middle of the night. I couldn't tell what time it was, but I kept hearing a slithering in the room. I wasn't the school icky and easily scared kind of girl, so I flipped on the switch and looked around in the room for snakes or any holes they might have escaped into. Nothing. I dismissed it and went back to sleep. The next night, when I heard the slithering, I flipped on my torch light to check the room. I checked the whole room and was just going back to sleep when something odd caught my eye. My desk was directly in front of me, and the chair was pushed into it neatly. The desk was placed in a way so that when I sat on the desk, I had my back facing the bed. From beside the chair, I saw a weird glint. At first I thought that it might be something metallic, which is until it moved, and very deliberately so. At this point I was scared. I calmly got off my bed, pretending I didn't see it, and left my room. I went straight to my sister's bedroom, woke her up, and told her what I saw. At first, she was skeptical, naturally, but then she decided to check my bedroom for me. When she did, there was nothing under my desk or anywhere in that matter. The next night I awoke to a peculiar whining. Creepy as it was, it didn't stop me from turning on the flashlight. This time the light fell directly on its torso, and my heart jumped to my mouth. There was a creature in the room with me, and as soon as the light fell on it, it slithered towards me, slowly but surely. At this point, I was paralyzed. Mouth agape and horse-stock eyes. I never really got a good look at it, since as it got closer, the light concentrated on a smaller part of it, but its torso looked like it was veiled, or maybe it was made of liquid smoke. I don't know. It slithered closer and closer, blocking out the light from my flashlight, and I felt something very close to my face. It wasn't a breath, but I remember being terrified beyond imagination. It was very, very close to my face, and it whispered only one thing in the creepiest sound I have heard till now. Friends, I'm sure that is what I heard before I passed out. You would think it had stopped coming to my vision, but no. It comes to me every night. It creeps on me When I am working with my back to the bed, I sometimes feel like it's lying next to me in the dark, while I lay quietly paralyzed with fear. When I had tried to tell my sister about it, it created a distraction in the kitchen and very fleetingly showed itself. I knew I was to stay quiet. I couldn't talk about it. This has been going on for a month now. I think it thinks it is my friend, but it terrifies me beyond anything. I don't know how to get rid of it. It really terrifies me. I don't want it around. I know I can't talk about it, but I am hoping to God it cannot read. It AKSDHVF Liad OSDKJ Heads FIVUA F7 I read I know Kalai everybody kill friend read story 5 Werewolf Ears. Did you hear about Sal? Jimmy lifted his eyes from his work, looked at George's reflection and reply, Sal? No, what's up with him? He probably spent more time hovering over people, talking to their reflections in the large mirror on the wall than he did conversing with them face to face. This unique perspective of people, he and his profession never fail to make him feel more like a fly on the wall than an actual participant in a conversation. Jimmy looked at people like he did puzzle pieces. Sure, most of them seemed the same or quite similar, but if you picked one piece out of the pile you could see its own unique shape. It amazed him how all these singular pieces somehow managed to fit together. Sure, every now and again you'd have a piece that needed to be pressed into place with a little more force than the others, or a piece that went missing. But no picture was perfect. All the one-on-one tie-ins he'd had with most of the male inhabitants in town over the past 40-odd years made him feel like a kind of counselor or advisor to the town. Oh, you haven't heard Sal's in the hospital, some sort of coma. George hoped his enthusiasm for delivering this juicy bit of gossip didn't come off as uncaring. Coma. He was just in here last week. He lowered his scissors and looked right at George's reflection with a stunned look on his face. Come to think of it, he said he had a doctor's appointment later that day. He wasn't looking too good either. Yeah. According to Sue, the doctors don't know what's wrong with him. He just collapsed last night while playing bingo at the church. Oh, and get this, Carl's son Kevin, the one with the exterminator business, disappeared the other day. Nobody's seen hide nor hair of him in a few days. Jimmy stood there thinking about his conversation with Sal the other day. That seems normal enough to me. Doesn't Kevin have a girlfriend who lives out of town? He's probably just shacked up with her. He does, but he's missed appointments, and nobody has heard from him, answered George with an air of certainty. He loved to be the guy with all the answers. Jimmy scratched his head, now that I think about it. Sal mentioned having Kevin spray his attic last week. Said he some sort of infestation up there. Get this, according to him his entire attic was covered in some sort of webbing, and it was all squirming with what looked like thin, short strands of steamer. George turned his head to look at Jimmy, his expression a big question mark. What? Like silkworms? I've never heard of an infestation like that before. Jimmy spun George around in the barber chair and looked straight at him. Me neither, but that's what he said. Little white strands hanging from webs. It was strange the other day. Sal comes in here for a haircut every 2 weeks like clockwork. I don't recall him ever going longer than 2 weeks without one. But when he came in here the last time, he looked like he hadn't been in the shop in a couple of months. His hair was a lot longer than it should have been and was stark white. George didn't seem too impressed. Hey, he's an old white hair, has been for years. No, his hair used to be gray. There's a difference. Trust me, I notice these things. Who else but me knows about that dent on the back of your head? George defensively reached back and rubbed the back of his head. Okay, you're the expert, but... And another thing, Jimmy said, cutting George off. He had the wildest werewolf ears I've ever seen. George's puzzled expression beckoned Jimmy to elaborate. Oh, it's something my father used to say to customers with hair in or on their ears. Sal never had much your hair before, but the other day his ears were a damn jungle. Jimmy decided not to mention that he thought he'd seen some of the werewolf hairs twitching when he was sweeping them up later on. He had blamed it on drinking to more cups of coffee than usual that day. George settled back in his chair. Well, it seems to me like we're carrying on 3 different conversations here. I don't see what any of this has to do with Sal being in the hospital. I'm going to check in on him later when I pick up Sue from there. Jimmy absent-mindedly brushed a white hair off of his arm, spun George back around, and returned to the task at hand. Jimmy didn't have another customer after George left. He'd had plenty of boring days like today, waiting for people to drag themselves into the barber shop, for a haircut was just part of the job. He tossed back 3 aspirin and washed them due, when with a swig of old burnt coffee, he decided to go see Sal if he could just get his headache to subside a bit. He'd been feeling it slowly ramping up all day, and now he was making it hard to think straight. That's it, he said aloud to the empty shop. He was tired and just wanted to go home and sleep off whatever he was coming down with. He shut off the lights, grabbed his coat, and locked up as he stepped out of sight of the front display window. Something about the size of a child's fist slipped down from the ceiling on a thin strand of filament. It landed on the counter littered with the tools of the barber trade and swiftly headed towards the back room. It came across a stray white hair, attached it to a strand of silk hanging from its spinneret, and dragged it along behind it as it crawled down the counter to the floor and entered the back room. It approached a garbage bag laying in front of the back door, easily slit the plastic bag of hair open, and began to emit a shrill sound reminiscent of a whistling kettle. Slowly over the next several minutes, little white hairs slipped out of the bag and slinked towards the source of the noise. It then attached them one by one to the ever-lengthening strand of silk trailing behind it. It crawled back to the place in the ceiling it originally came through with its collection of twitching white things in tow, and slipped out of sight. The laden silk strand quickly followed and vanished into the ceiling as well. A cargo van was haphazardly parked about 10 feet off of an old dirt road in the middle of the forest. Its sides were emblazoned with identical logos that read "Kappa Extermination." A pale-skinned man sat stiffly in the front seat. The top of his skull was ripped open like the top of a pan of Jiffy Pop. Chubby, white worms, engorged with brain matter, squirmed inside of the man's exposed skull. They wiggled here and there all over his LAP and the front seats of the van. A spider about the size of a baseball sat in the passenger seat. Its silvery sheen gave it an almost mechanical appearance. It had a worm pen to the seat by its pedipalps. Emaciated little husks of worms lay all around it. The back seat was covered in a glistening, almost translucent pattern of silk. Little white strands were woven into the pattern like some sort of twitching tapestry. Story 6. Don't ever look back. You know that feeling you get when you walk down a dark hallway? The feeling you get when the lights are out and the room behind, why? Ooh, the feeling that someone or something is right there, behind you, inching its way closer to you? Well, whatever you do, don't ever look back. My name is Michael, and I just turned 20. I worked as security guard for a small office in a rough neighborhood. They sell paper or something along those lines. I didn't really pay attention to the other people there. I usually sat near the door during the afternoon, checking everyone that comes in and out. It was a pretty laid-back job, and it helped me pay for my night school. I usually only worked during the day, and I had never been at the office past 6. But one day my boss asked me if I could take the late shift, as the night guard had quit due to unforeseen circumstances, whatever that means. Anyway, I said I'd do it, but just for that night. All I really had to do was lock up and sit down in the main office and relax, right? Well, not really. I was given a paper with a list of a few instructions for in total. Lock doors in main room once everyone has gone home, no later than 12 a.m. Go through west hallway and lock all doors except for door #6, which must be unlocked. Then turn around and do not move for 10 seconds, no matter what. After 10 seconds, turn and face the hallway. Then start walking, taking one step every second. Don't look back. Don't ever look back. Go to main office and hide under desk, facing the front, and wait for door #6 to close. And lock leave at 6:30 a.m. Do not lock the front door, but lock the gate. It started normal enough. I didn't know if they decided to play some kind of joke on me, since it was my first time, but if it had been meant as a prank, they did a good job. I was scared out of my mind. The instructions were so specific and just all target. Her creepy. What would happen if I took a second more or a second less? What if I missed the deadline at 6:30? What would happen to me? I tried to get the thoughts out of my head, and I focused on the instructions. I wanted to study them before the night shift so that I wouldn't make a mistake. Before I knew it, it was 11 p.m., and most people started to leave. Janitors and workers that stayed late all started to file out, each wishing me luck. I waited a while until every single person was gone. Why would they wish me luck? I had to focus. It was only for a night. It was probable. Why nothing? But I just wanted to make sure. At 1:45 midnight, I decided to lock up the main room and head through the hallway. Lock all the doors, unlock door 6. Got it. Turn around and wait. 10 seconds. Okay, ... I started counting in my head. 1, 2. Then I felt the temperature change. 3, 4. It got a little colder, and that's when I heard the door. 5. It started to open. 6. Then I felt it, like someone breathing down my neck. 7, 8. I was about to run, but then I remembered the instructions. I have to stay still. 9, 10. I turned and started down the hallway. Take a step every second. My heart was beating out of my chest. My whole body was cold. I couldn't feel my hands. I kept going, even though I was about to pass out from fear. I navigated through the seemingly endless hallway, leaving behind whatever the thing behind me was. But I felt it watch me as I walked. There was nothing between me and it. If it had wanted to, it could have killed me right then and there. I was sure of it. I didn't know what it was, but I didn't feel safe near it. At the halfway point, I felt it standing there. As I passed by a fire extinguisher, I caught a glimpse of the beast's reflection in the glass. I couldn't really make it out, but whatever it was slowly approaching. It knew I had seen it. I quickened my pace ever so slightly. My whole body went numb, so much so that couldn't even feel the ground under me anymore. Cold and sweating, I continued down the hallway. Almost there, I thought. I just need to get into the office and hide under the desk. I prayed to God that I'd make it. Prayed to anyone that would listen at that point. By that time, I wasn't scared anymore at Washington. As much more than that, I moved robotically, just trying to make it to the end of the nightmare. I finally got to the door and realized it was right behind me. I turned the corner and opened the door, closed it behind me, and hid under the desk, as instructed. I faced the wall and waited. I remained there for a while, and during that time, nothing happened. Still, I knew it was there. I was petrified, horrified, so scared that I felt like my very soul might just give up and leave. A few more seconds passed, and all of a sudden the door to the office opened. Is it coming in? I didn't read about this in the instructions. What do I do? The instructions, that's when I realized didn't have them anymore. Where had they gone? Did I drop them? What now? It came. And then the room's temperature dropping as it made its presence known. What is this thing? A demon, a monster. Whatever it was not following the rules. It was looking for me. At that point, I was in tears. I tried to hold it in at first, but my fear took over, and I didn't have to anymore. I couldn't move, my eyes blurred, and I felt myself begin to black out. That's when I heard it leave and close the door. I wanted to let out a huge breath of relief, but decided against it. I kept listening for the other door. After a second, it to close, then locked. I let everything out, then tears streaming down my face, breathing harder than I ever have. I checked my watch. It was 6:23, just 7 minutes until 6:30, and then I could leave. I chose to remain huddled under the desk until then. 6:30 rolled around, and I was ready to bolt. I opened the office door and rushed to the main entrance, practically sprinting for the gate. I got out and locked it behind me. I rushed to my car and started it. As I pulled out, I felt much safer, and so I disregarded the second instruction I'd been given, and took one last look back at the building and froze. Paralyzed with fear, the creature was standing in the doorway. Looking right at me, I hit the gas and sped home. The next day I handed in my letter of resignation. It's been a few weeks since and I found another job, but I still can't get that thing out of my head. Sometimes I feel like it's still behind me as I walk through my home. I never should have looked back, and I'll never made that mistake again. Story 7. Good night. The following is a transcript of a recording that was discovered in a hospital laboratory. At the time of this submission, the cause of the incident is believed to have. Been a chemical leak. Recording begins. 3 years ago, a team of scientists figured out how to stimulate the language centers of the brain while someone was sleeping. I was on the team. That came after the team which got to use that knowledge for our own experiments. It seemed important at the time to see what lied in the unconscious minds of everyday people. At first, we focused on written language. We sent out advertisements, often on college campuses or online, and after sifting through the inevitable unsolicited offers, we selected the best candidates to come in for a physical exam. We wanted people who didn't display any signs of mental issues, ones whose brains and bodies wouldn't reject the sleeping drug we would be injecting into their system. We ended up with 437 subjects, but we culled the group down to an even 400. Really, it was just an excuse to use a round number. We separated the FINA-L subjects into groups of 10 and laid them on comfy hospital beds in warm, dark rooms so that they could sleep undisturbed. Everyone was excited for the experiment to begin, but there were the things to finish up first. We gave each subject a pen and a square piece of paper, all the while laughing at their nervous little jokes. Of course, we won't judge you if you draw dicks in your sleep, we assured the college freshman with zits all over his sweaty face. Anything you write is confidential. We assured the woman to the tan line where most people wore their wedding ring. We connected THM to the machine that would send a current through their brain, activating their language centers as they slept. Then we carefully injected the anesthetic into their veins and watched them drift off. We told them all good night before leaving them to their own devices in a small room. The other researchers and I chatted for 6 hours, talking about graduate school and lab interns. His subjects slumbered in their beds. After the allotted time had passed, we went in and helped everyone up, thanked them for their service, and paid them on their way out. We had them wait in a well-lit room to wake up a bit, offering cups of coffee before seeing them off. For 100 people drove away in separate directions, and we figured that this was the end of it. We collected their papers and pens from the bedside tables, and then we read what they had written. We had originally theorized that people would draw abstract shapes or scroll out sloppy confessions that their dreams had dug up from the recesses of their minds. After all, that's what dreams are, right? Just a mix of whatever our brains have left over. At the end of the day, we thought that we would see whatever lurked in those unconscious depths, whatever cute secrets the average citizen hides in their waking hours. Everyone, all 400 subjects, had written one word, help their deep in no hesitation, no question that it was the message that they'd wanted to send. The writing couldn't have been clearer if they'd been awake. The penmanship, down to the presser he put on the pencil, was exactly same on every sheet. We ran every scrap of paper, all 400 pieces, next to each other, one after another. All the same message. Help, of course, this was like something from an internet horror story, so we decided to repeat our experiment on a different group. Maybe someone had contaminated the earlier group. Maybe this was a mistake. It would have been the biggest screw-up in the lab's history, but a mistake nonetheless. We didn't want to think about the other option. We found a bigger subject pool this time, of 1T, house and people from different backgrounds and countries. We wanted the most diverse group we could gather to avoid the prospect of having the subjects cross-contaminate each other. We even made sure that we had subjects with high, squeaky voices and low, incredible baritones. We left nothing to chance, separating them into groups of 10 again, and renting out a whole hospital for this latest attempt. We tried speech this time, since faking 400 scraps of paper would have been significantly easier than faking 1,000 voices. We laid them down again, and this time we didn't talk to them. We didn't want to give them any ideas. We gave each person a pair of huge, fluffy earmuffs, so that whatever we heard from the other subjects wouldn't disturb the rest of the row. Then we conducted an EEG, the test with the electrodes on the subject's head. The electrodes led to a monitor that had those stereotypical brain waves, but also to the machine that would help us target the language centers with the right electrical currents. We made this experiment as sterile as we could. We didn't even say good night before we turned off the lights. The plan was to measure the subjects' sleep patterns, and when they were all in REM sleep, we'd switch the machine on. They screamed. As soon as the switch was flipped, 1,000 mouths opened into gaping caverns. Their tongues rose from between their lips, and their voices were like dying animals. Their bodies remained as still as boards, with only their wailing to suggest that they were anything but corpses. The effort of screaming made every subject pale as chalk and set tears down the corners of everyone's eyes, even behind our glass walls. With our clipboards and recording devices, we scientists felt a chill run through our spines. We only lasted 10 seconds against the screaming before we cut the recording, cut the electric current, cut everything, and ushered every subject out of their rooms as quickly as we could, barely paying them. We were men of science, men of reason and knowledge and cold, calculating logic. This couldn't be happening. We analyzed the screams for horrors, even though it hurt our souls in a way none of us could explain. Every second of screaming was agony. We went through 18 lab technicians as one after the other vomited, even sold themselves trying to mess with the sound waves. Finally, one man, through tears and snot and drool covering his keyboard, managed to slow down the audio enough for something that resembled words to be heard. He stumbled out of the lab, choking and clutching his chest, blood seeping from under his eyelids, and collapsed at our feet. Within 3 seconds, he stopped breathing. Within 5, he was dead. No one wanted to go in to listen to what he had done after that. At the time of this recording, I am in the lab under the desk. I hope someone finds this and listens to it, even though my hand is shaking and my body is cold and my heart, it will explode soon in my chest, a mess of ventricles and arteries, and it will all be my fault. I listened to the audio. I knew I shouldn't have, but I did. You helped us. They're here now. We should never have let them free, but they're here now. They're behind me. They're unintelligible. Recording ends.